So ever since I started wildlife photography, which goes back to 2005 when I shot with this S2IS, I wanted to own a big prime lens, something like the 400 f2.8 or the 600 f4, because that's what I'd seen wildlife photographers carry. And since I've got my first DSLR in 2008, I've only been shooting on lighter zoom lenses, while I've been secretly eyeing a big lens all along. And now that I'm finally able to afford a big lens, a realization has dawned on me that maybe I don't need a big lens because it doesn't give me significantly better images than what I can produce with the kit I already have. And it also comes with an opportunity cost of be it the weight or the amount of space it occupies in my bag. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the thinking that led to that decision, because I think it might be useful for anybody who's on the fence about upgrading to a big prime or even a premium fixed aperture zoom like the 200-400 f4. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to categorize lenses into two groups. All prime lenses such as the 400 2.8 or the 600 f4, along with all premium fixed aperture zooms like the 200-400 f4 by Nikon or Canon, I'm going to group them into a category called the big lenses. Now these lenses are telephoto lenses with wide apertures, and therefore they have more optical elements, making them bigger and heavier, and therefore big lenses. Other zoom lenses like the 200-600 by Sony or the 100-400 by Sony and Canon, or this 100-500 by Canon, I'm going to group them into a category called light zoom lenses because they're much smaller and lighter than the aforementioned big lenses and also have much narrower apertures, like this one is 7.1 at 500 mm. The reason I've clubbed the 200-400 f4 with the big primes and not the zoom lenses is because of the cost. The big lenses on average cost about $12,000 US or about 10 lakh rupees. The lighter zooms, even though they are about $2,000 or $1.5 to 2 lakh rupees, they're only a fraction of the cost of the big lenses. And to me, that is a huge factor when I'm evaluating equipment. Though I've never owned a big lens, I've had opportunities to shoot with them on trips that I've either rented or borrowed them on. Later, I've gone back to the same destinations with the zooms I've owned, such as the 100-500 Canon or the 200-600 by Sony. So while it might not be a perfect A/B test, I have an acceptable comparison of the results a big lens can produce versus what a zoom lens can produce in similar conditions that help me make my mind up. Let's start with the biggest point of contention, which is the background blur or the bokeh. Big lenses produce softer, smoother, blurrier, more out of focus backgrounds than lighter zooms. And this is desirable in wildlife photography. Now, before we get into image comparison, let's look at some of the factors driving the quality of background blur overall. In general, wider the aperture, better the bokeh. So a 400 mm f2.8 lens at f2.8 produces a much more blurrier background than this 100-500 mm at 400 mm, where its widest aperture is 6.3. Focal length also impacts background blur. So an image shot at 400 mm is likely to have a blurrier background than an image shot at 200 mm, everything else being the same. The distance between the subject and the lens also impacts background blur. Closer the subject to the lens, better the blur. And lastly, and probably most importantly, the distance from the subject to the background also impacts background blur. Farther away the background, the better the blur. This is why I like to lie down flat on the ground while photographing ground animals, because I'm able to push the background as far back as possible while the subject is beautifully isolated. This is almost my default way of shooting. And when we as good photographers take care of these aspects to whatever extent possible in the field, I think lighter zooms produce background blurs that are way more acceptable than we give them credit for. I went to Kenya in 2018 with the Canon 200-400 f4 and shot almost exclusively at f4. I went back there again in 2022 with the 100-500. Here's a comparison of images in similar settings, habitats, and angles. On top are images on the big lens, and down below are images from a zoom lens. Now in both of these cases, the other aspects of getting the blurriest background, such as shooting at the widest possible aperture, shooting at the longest available focal length, getting as close to eye level as possible, and being as close to the subject as possible, have all been taken into account. And sure, the bokehs in the photos on top are better because they were all with the 400 mm f4, but I'm completely okay with the quality of background blurs I'm getting in the photos below as well. I went to Kabini in 2017 when I was shooting with a 600 mm f4.0 and got a shot of this tiger walking towards us, which I shot at 4.0. In 2021, when I was photographing with the 200-600 Sony, I got a shot of this tiger shared below, which was made at 600mm f6.3. If anything, I was at a much lower angle while shooting with the big lens, which is enhancing the background blur. And in the image below, you can see that I'm well above the eye level of the tiger, and still, the quality of the background blur is completely fine. I've been photographing desert and Indian foxes at their den since 2012. Every year, I spent about a week at a den photographing fox pups play. On top are images I've made with a big lens, and down below are images with a lighter zoom. Sure, these are all different compositions and habitats, but if I had to look at it from the point of view of subject sharpness, or isolation of the subject from its background, or the quality of the background blur, I don't think it's easy to pick out one set as a clear winner. I think the set below, which are from my lighter zoom lens, are just as good. So while big lenses produce blurrier backgrounds, lighter telephotos aren't that far behind. But there is one big advantage lighter zooms have over big lenses, thanks to how flexible they can be and the amazing focusing capabilities of modern mirrorless cameras. When I was in Kenya in 2018, I had the door of my car removed so that I could lie down flat on the floor of the car and shoot big cats at eye level. Something like this. The shots on top are the behind the scenes and the shot below is the actual output. This was at 400 f4, so the really blurry background is both because of the wide aperture as well as the angle I was shooting at. However, when I went back to Kenya in 2022, having the car door open was not allowed anymore. So I relied on hanging a zoom lens as low as possible from the window using a monopod. Something like this, except I used a monopod from the window of the car and not the car floor, as you can see here. And these are some of the results with this technique. I absolutely love the blurred backgrounds thanks to how low I could get. Especially in the image of the cheetah, you'll be able to see foliage in the foreground that's completely out of focus, giving you an idea of how low I could actually get. And I was able to do this because of the flexibility of a light zoom lens. There is no way I'd be able to maneuver a big lens to be able to get into this position. So to round up on bokehs and backgrounds, I think big lenses produce better backgrounds overall, but I dig the flexibility of lighter zooms that help me get into better positions and enable better backgrounds. And this is more relevant for the kind of photography that I do. So when I step out of the field, I'm thinking of a collection of photos that tell the full story and not a photo. And in order to tell the full story, along with portraits, I need photos of the habitat, photos of animals interacting with the habitat, conservation concerns, and so on and so forth, all of which are shot on multiple, typically wider focal lengths. And now that I've started doing videos, this is all the more important. A zoom lens like the 100-500 gives me so much flexibility on range. Here are two images that my friend Sumit has shot, probably seconds apart, one at 500, which is a great portrait, and another at 100, which is a great habitat shot. Wildlife photography involves long hours of wait, followed by a few seconds in which a few hundred shots are made. And in these seconds, taking time to put a camera down and pick another one up is also precious time lost. So a zoom lens with multiple focal lengths on it helps me make more out of every sighting. The average weight of a big lens is about 3 kgs. This 100-500 is about 1.5 kilos. The kind of wildlife photography I do involves a lot of walking, hiking, wading, crawling, and generally waiting around in sometimes harsh weather conditions. So I optimize my equipment to carry the least amount of gear that I absolutely need so that if something shows up at the very end of the day, I'm still ready to shoot. I live in a city, so most wildlife travel involves taking a flight. I fly economy, in which I'm allowed one cabin bag into which I need to fit all my equipment. A big lens takes 1/2 of that bag. And since I've started doing videos, the real estate in that bag has gotten all the more premium. So while a big lens helps me get a better money shot, it comes in the way of everything else I could carry to tell a better story. I remember back when I got my first DSLR, 1250 was the highest ISO I could shoot on, and at 1250 images were super grainy. These days, two things have happened. I can shoot at insanely high ISOs, like 50K, and still get printable images. Secondly, noise reduction and removal softwares have gotten really good. So the additional stops of light that big lenses come with aren't as valuable today as they were, say, 6 or 7 years ago. So when I balance out cost, flexibility, space utility, and image quality, I net out heavily in favor of lighter zooms. Now, some things which I don't do, which help me make my decision, are I don't shoot small birds, which if I did, I'd think much more seriously about big lenses because I'll need to put teleconverters on them. Secondly, my go-to style is wider than portrait. My favorite images are closer to 15mm than they are to 500mm. And thirdly, I don't spend like 100 days a year in the field like some of my professional friends. So I have the flexibility to rent a big lens for a short duration if I really need it for a specific trip. But until any of these change, I'll stick to my zoom lens because as far as background blurs are concerned, while big lenses definitely have better background blurs, I dig the flexibility of a lighter zoom that helps me get into better positions and therefore better backgrounds. The additional f-stops on a big lens don't matter that much anymore, with high ISO performance and noise reduction getting more and more capable. On price and portability, zoom lenses win. And on specialized subjects, while big lenses win, I have the flexibility to rent a big lens for a specific trip. Now, none of this is an argument against buying a big lens if you've already made up your mind. But if you're on the fence, then this is what I suggest. Go ahead and save up the money you need to buy a big lens. Then, rent the big lens and go to a place that you visit often. Compare the images you get there with what you already have from your existing kit and see if the upgrade makes sense from a utility, image quality, and cost perspective. If it does, go ahead and buy the big lens. If it doesn't, then congratulations, you are now sitting on a huge pile of cash with which you can plan many more wildlife trips. That is exactly how I'm going to Botswana in a few weeks from now.